Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 4, Episode 11, The Airport. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for listening today. I really appreciate it. Hope everyone's doing really well out there. I have no complaints, doing all right. But I did want to start the show out acknowledging yet another death in the Seinfeld family. Liz Sheridan, who played Helen Seinfeld, passed away this past week at the age of 93. And wow, the second Seinfeld mother to die this month. Now, dying at the age of 93, and Estelle Harris, I believe she was 93 or 94. So they lived very long lives. It doesn't make you think kind of how Kramer, reacts to someone really old dying. But obviously, she was such an important part of the show and always added so much. Very funny actress. Jerry Seinfeld actually tweeted out a really nice tribute to her with a photo of them on the set of Seinfeld and just said really nice things. Basically, how she kind of enveloped him in feeling so safe and kind of warm and cozy when she was on set. And I thought that was such a sweet way to pay tribute to her, especially she played his mother. So I think that is a beautiful thing to feel by the actress playing your mother, if it's not your real mother. So Jason Alexander, same thing. He tweeted out some really nice words in tribute to her. So rest in peace, Liz Sheridan. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful moments you contributed to Seinfeld. And there are many. Her first episode, which was in the first season, in fact, I talked about how I think she plays the character of Helen so well, where it's, she's not this overbearing mom, which I think is a trope we've seen a lot, especially with like Jewish mothers. It's kind of this stereotype. Oh, Jewish mothers are so overbearing and whatnot. I just loved what she brought to the show. I think it could have been played a little bit over the top, but Estelle Harris had to take that role as George's mother. Someone who was Jerry's mother didn't need to be that way. And so Liz Sheridan really portrayed that completely perfectly. So while I'm sorry she's gone, I'm also thankful for the gifts she gave us in Seinfeld. Other than that, I got to be honest, I am still riding on a high from a show I went to this past Sunday. It wasn't Easter related. I'm Hindu, guys. I don't celebrate Easter, but if you do, happy belated Easter. I hope it was fabulous for you. But I spent Easter at Red Rocks Amphitheater watching John Mulaney. It was, oh my gosh, a real highlight of any comedy event I've ever been to. I mean, he was incredible. I scored really good seats. I just happened to see that there was an artist pre-sale back in December. And so this was my Christmas gift to my husband, this show. And so, it was, we ended up getting really great seats, and John Mulaney just did not disappoint in the least. It was incredible. And it was a first for me. I've been to many shows at Red Rocks, but they've all been music performances. So this was the first time I would see a comedy performance there, but also it was a matinee. So it was at 3 p.m., which served to give John Mulaney a lot of material, in fact. So I don't know how this wasn't figured out or thought about. By the time he got on stage, a little bit after 3 p.m., the sun was beating down on his face. I mean, he was squinting. I mean, I remember when he came out, I'm going, oh, this poor guy. I mean, we're facing away from the sun as the audience. I still had my sun hat on. I knew it was going to be pretty intense out there, but he just worked it into the act. He's like, I don't have sunglasses. Does anyone have sunglasses they can give me? People threw sunglasses up. He chose like this black, thick pair of sunglasses. And then a few minutes later in the show, he kind of stopped and chuckled, kind of in the middle of a bit. And he goes, it just occurred to me, I'm not wearing sunscreen. And everyone in the audience is like, no, my God. Because honestly, that was one of the first things I thought of. After he got on stage, he's greeting the audience. I'm seeing him sort of squinting. The sun is just beating down on him. I'm like, man, I really hope he wore sunscreen. So when he said that, you could just hear every single person in the audience going like, oh my God, what the hell? And he's like, these sunglasses are going to be burned into my face for my evening show. So that's going to be lovely. And then so he solicited people to give him some sunscreen. So people were throwing up these bottles, and one of those kind of, it's kind of newer on the market, and I really like them actually. There's sort of the bar that you can kind of apply on your face. It's sort of like a deodorant type, bar, whatever. So he ended up slathering that on his face, telling the audience, hey man, like tell me where I need to like rub it in more because I can't see myself. Oh my gosh, so funny. And then probably a half an hour later, he's like, ladies and gentlemen, I really want to continue this show, but I don't want to pass out. So I think I'm at the point where I need a hat. I need a hat to protect myself. So people were throwing their hats up, and he picked this sun hat that was lined. The lining of the hat was the American flag. It was incredible. So just picture John Mulaney. He was also, for Easter, he was wearing kind of this light tan suit. So a light tan suit, black sunglasses, kind of streaky sunscreen on his face, and then this hat with the lining of the American flag on the inside. I mean, and then he kept saying, I swear I am a 100% sober man. I know I don't look like it. I mean, he just incorporated every element of the kind of torture of the sun on his face into his act. And it was just, it was so well done. It was almost like, did he plan this? Did he plant this kind of stuff? But I'm sure he didn't, because he's just that genius of a comedian. And wow, I felt so lucky to be there. Even more so because before the show, before John Mulaney came on, Dave Chappelle showed up and surprised the audience with a short set. He was apparently doing a set later in the evening in Colorado Springs, but I'm thinking he just heard, hey, Mulaney's at Red Rocks. I've played Red Rocks a bunch. Why don't I just go to his early show and surprise the crowd, which he totally did. And that was incredible too. I mean, in my eyes, two legends of comedy I got to see. So I just felt so incredibly lucky to be there. Like I said, I'm still just sort of, I can't stop thinking about it. It was such an incredible show. All right. So I'll use this energy from John Mulaney and all his funny, first of all, his whole act was incredible. For any of you fans out there, he's gone through some stuff in the last couple of years, and really his whole act is about that. But he has this, it sounds weird, but like a beautiful way of making these incredibly dark moments in his life funny, but not making fun of it. I highly recommend it. If he is coming to your town, please go and see him. It is totally worth it. So on that note, like I said, I'll bring this energy, this high from the John Mulaney show with a surprise Dave Chappelle appearance. I'm going to bring it to this episode. So thank you, John Mulaney, for that. All right. So the synopsis for The Airport is as follows. Jerry and Elaine are flying back from St. Louis when their flight is canceled and they are forced onto another plane. Jerry meets a supermodel in first class while Elaine is left suffering in coach. George and Kramer run back and forth between two airports to pick them up. Kramer stalks a man who's owed him money for 20 years. George snubs a transported convict and then runs afoul of him in the airplane bathroom. This episode was written by Larry Charles. So we start out in this car. Jerry and Elaine are on their way to the airport. Elaine is scatting very loudly and very annoyingly, I have to say. So Jerry asks her to shut up. Could you do me a favor? Could you shut up? She laughs. She's not offended at all. Then Jerry tries to take off his jacket because he's hot and tells Elaine to grab the wheel. She doesn't want to, and he pretends his arm is stuck. It's just this whole funny thing. And then he asks her to open the window, and she says, well, the window doesn't work. And he's like, God, I hate rental cars. Nothing works. The windows don't work. The radio doesn't work. And it smells like a cheap hooker. Or is that you? He asks Elaine. And her response is perfect. Give me $10 and find out. So they're just having this light, funny conversation. And Jerry says, how this worked out so well. I got an extra ticket to St. Louis. Elaine could tag along and see her sister. And she's like, yeah, it worked out good. And then Jerry says that George is picking them up from the airport. She can't believe it. How did you get him to do that? Well, apparently George He's always bragging about his vertical leap. So he bet Jerry $50 that he could touch the awning in front of his apartment. So what happened? He didn't come within a foot of the thing. Oh, so great. So he said, hey, George, pick us up from the airport. You don't have to give me the $50. Elaine asks how they're doing on time. And he's like, oh, I got this timed out perfectly. But then we see a shot of them chasing the rental car shuttle with the driver laughing. Sorry. So Jerry's timed out schedule just gets thwarted by the rental car shuttle just leaving without them. The purpose of this scene, of course, this is our setup. We find out everything, why Jerry and Elaine are in St. Louis and that George is picking them up from the airport. And my take, this is my favorite dynamic between Jerry and Elaine. It's so relaxed, such an easy conversation they're having. I love the moments of teasing. Him telling her to shut up is one of my all-time favorite Seinfeld moments. And I don't blame him. Like I said, her singing wasn't great. It was pretty annoying. Now, his explanation for us, the audience, really, as to what they're doing was a tad too expositional, too much explanation there, but I forgive it considering how funny the rest of this scene is, and well, really the whole episode. So yeah, I mean, it's who really talks like that, but whatever, I forgive it. Exposition is such a hard thing to do very well all the time, and Seinfeld does it pretty well most of the time, so every now and then I'll forgive just a listing off of what they're doing. I love when they are laughing together. I think the cheap hooker retort is so perfect. And then the way they laugh together about the George story, not even, he's not even close to the awning. It just seems so real, so grounded, and very, very friend-like, how friends do talk. And I also love the end when they're chasing the rental car shuttle. It's a nice little button to how fun and relaxed they were in the car. And then they're like in a panic chasing this shuttle. And the jerk driver who's just like, sorry. So delighted. Next, we are at the curb of the airport. Jerry and Elaine rush up to give their bags to the sky cap. Jerry asks Elaine for some small bills for a tip. And she suggests, well, I have $5. He's like, no, give me 10. She thinks that's excessive, so Jerry wants to ask the guy. And this guy says, well, it depends on the people, depends on the bag. Well, what about us? You two? Psh, I wouldn't expect much. You two don't even look like you know what you're doing. Jerry says, come on. He says, all right, well, between you and me, I usually get $5 a bag. Elaine doesn't believe it. $5 a bag? And she thinks this guy's trying to take advantage, and she says, you have some nerve. And Jerry gives him the $10. They're running late. They got to go. Elaine doubles down and says, you're lucky I don't report you. And then after they're gone, the attendant puts Jerry's bags with the other JFK bags and then tosses Elaine's towards Honolulu. I love that. The purpose of this scene, we're seeing the beginning of Elaine's terrible experience with this flight. And we also did need to see that her bag gets tossed to the Honolulu pile of bags. I like this scene. It's a little extraneous in the sense that the only purpose it serves is to see that Elaine's bag gets sent to Honolulu, but it's a nice little sort of aside nonetheless. It's also nice when a guest actor gets a pretty substantial scene with two of the principal actors on the show. The man who plays the Skycap, I actually recognize him from Terminator 2. He was one of the mental asylum workers who's trying to calm down Sarah Connor. Anyway, he's really funny. I like the way he says Honolulu, but I also like that he teases them. You guys don't even look like you know what you're doing. Like, he's really funny. And the tip conversation, I feel so relatable. It's like, it's relatable even today. I never know what the hell to give. I mean, I find myself tipping people I would never normally tip. I don't know. And then I question, wait, should I have been tipping people who do this? I don't know. So very relatable. $5 a bag does seem a little bit excessive to me, but if you're in his position, what are you going to say? Oh, not much. All right, moving on. We're in the airport and we see a couple of these short scenes of Jerry and Elaine rushing and running through the airport. And Jerry is annoyed that Elaine is running very girly. She needs to run like a man. Get your knees up. Then we cut to the ticket counter and we find out the flight's been canceled and there's no flights into JFK, but there are seats on a flight to LaGuardia and it's boarding now, but the seats aren't together. And Jerry says, yeah, we'll take them. Elaine says, we're not going to sit together? He says, whatever, it's not that long. You'll read. Well, what about George? He's picking us up at Kennedy. Well, we'll call him. There's no time to call him. There's no time. So they'll call from the plane, which they never do. The attendant says that one of the seats is in first class and the other is in coach, but they're the same price since their flight was canceled. Then Jerry just says, I'll take the first class. Elaine's like, Jerry? And he's like, Elaine, have you ever flown first class? And she hasn't. So he explains, look, he's had that experience and he can't go back to coach and he won't. We flew here, coach. Yeah, that's a point. So Elaine says, fine, take the first class. If the plane crashes, everyone in first class will die anyway. Yeah, I'm sure you'll live. The ticket agent is played by Maggie Egan, and she's still working to this day, has done tons of television since the early 80s. She actually has a background in improv comedy. And I think she's perfectly fine. Not a ton of comedy for her in this scene. It's very transactional, but she's got that authoritative kind of ticket agent tone that works for this role. And I do like the way she says, there's no time. And the purpose of this scene, we see that Jerry and Elaine have to take a different flight. And that will set up kind of George and Kramer's plot as well. And my take, all right, well, let's just get this out of the way. I, of course, hate this sexist dialogue by Jerry about running like a girl and that Elaine needs to run like a man. But the visual of them running is hilarious. And JLD, of course, crushes all this physical comedy, especially after he says, get your knees up. She does try and get her knees up with her bags just jangling around her. But yeah, fuck off, Jerry. You cheated on a race in high school, so don't even start about running. But yeah, very sexist. Not a fan. I really enjoy the scene at the counter with the ticket agent. I mean, just how quickly Jerry says he's going to take the first class seat. It's so great. And, here we're seeing that we're really rounding out now and settling into what these characters are about, which is that they're selfish. That's sort of the core of who they are. So I like that we're settling into that. And that's a lot of the fourth season is really where the show finds its footing. They've shaken off kind of all these other attempts of what they want these characters to be. And the selfish and cynical personas are taking root. And, well, I just couldn't love that more. It's great. The delivery of Elaine's plane crash line is great. JLD plays it so well. I mean, you can see Elaine knows this isn't really a great line. She's going to, the whole like, oh, well, if the plane crashes, you're going to die. But she says it anyway. And Jerry has the perfect comeback. Yeah, I'm sure you'll live. Okay, and then moving on, they are boarding the plane, and the flight attendant takes Elaine's boarding pass and says very curtly, third row right. Then he takes Jerry's boarding pass and smiles and says, welcome aboard, sir, you're in here. So Jerry goes the opposite way of Elaine, and he wishes Lainey a bon voyage. She tries to get a peek into first class, but then the curtain is quickly shut. Then we see Elaine. She's sitting in an aisle seat, but this man is approaching and says, miss, I think you're in my seat. So it turns out Elaine is in the dreaded middle seat, and the guy, my gosh, he's got like these big bulky bags with him. Apparently he doesn't believe in checking his bags. So he tosses one onto Elaine as he sits and crams his suitcase on his lap, piles the other bag on top. And he said, I can't stand, waiting for your bags after a flight. So Elaine is squished in this middle seat with a bag man next to her. And so, yeah, Elaine is in hell pretty much from the start of the flight before they even take off. And she says, help me. Meanwhile, in first class, Jerry has also mistakenly taken someone else's seat, but he's taken the seat of a gorgeous woman. She tells him, I think you're in my seat. So he moves over and lets her sit and takes one look and says, thank you. The purpose of this scene, we see very clearly the differences in what Jerry and Elaine are going to experience on this flight. And my take, I'm not sure these scenes could better represent how different these classes on planes can be. I'm actually not sure if there's been a better representation of this. I love that first moment with the flight attendant. He's so short with Elaine, and then the smile to welcome Jerry. It really sets the tone of what they're going to experience, like I said. And that close-up shot of Elaine after the curtain is closed, it looks like she looks over at that flight attendant and kind of like jerks back a little bit, like he's probably giving her a dirty look. Oh, it just says it all. It's great. Real quick, the actor who plays this flight attendant, James Bullock. I remember first seeing this episode and recognizing him right away. My family used to watch the show Too Close for Comfort. It starred Ted Knight, early 80s show. And this actor played Monroe. And from what I could tell, I think he was pretty much the first openly gay character, especially at that time. Certainly the one I'd ever seen. I was a huge fan of Three's Company, but Jack Tripper was a pretend gay character. And but anyway, I remember loving his character Monroe on Too Close for Comfort and the way he would annoy the Ted Knight character. It was so funny. And it also brings back fond memories of my late father because my dad loved Monroe as well. And it's just a great family memory for me. And so seeing not only just how great this episode is, I love seeing the actor who played Monroe from Too Close for Comfort. All right, so back to the scene. We see just how uncomfortable Elaine is going to be in this flight. The middle seat. Ugh, what an obnoxious asshole with those bags. And look, I don't think that would be allowed for anyone who has flown. They're pretty strict about stowing your luggage away. If it's not up top in the bins, then you have to make sure it's underneath the seat in front of you. But obviously, for the sake of TV fake reality, this guy has 2 bags on his freaking lap. So ridiculous. Now, I've flown a few times in the last couple of years just on the subject of being squished in like Elaine is. And I always fly coach or economy. In fact, my last flight was economy when I had to go to California. And basically, I think all that means is like you're in the back of the plane near the shitter. Oh my God. And I swear they are making seats smaller and smaller, more narrow and more. So it's like the thought of someone like having this much crap on his lap if you're already in this like really small seat. What a nightmare. I haven't had to take a very long flight in a long time, but I'm going the next time I take a flight over 3 hours, like I'll do whatever it takes. I'm going to spring for maybe business class or first class if possible, because those seats, I swear to God, they're shrinking them just to pile more people on. I love a great juxtaposition narrative, and this is pretty much the entire episode for Jerry and Elaine. We see over and over again the hell Elaine is going through, and then we see how pleasant an experience Jerry is having. What's the opposite of being cramped into a middle seat next to a guy with huge bags? Well, that would be, for Jerry at least, sitting next to a supermodel in a very roomy seat. And that thank you, that was just perfect. All right, next, we finally get to see George and Kramer. This is, I think, very rare to not see at least George until this late in the episode. So they are in Kramer's car, and George thanks Kramer for coming with him to pick up Jerry and Elaine. And I love Kramer ask, what made you think you could touch that awning? And then George kind of confesses, I confused it with a different awning. But George is so proud of himself. He's timed this out perfectly, kind of how Jerry was proud of himself earlier too. They're going to pull up exactly 17 minutes after they land. It's a thing of beauty, nothing pleases him more than a perfectly timed pickup. But then, Kramer's getting onto the Long Island Expressway. Oh, God, this ruins everything. This is a suicide mission. The traffic is going to be terrible. And George says, if I miss him, I don't get credit for the pickup and I have to pay him $50. Kramer says, will you relax? There's no traffic at this time. And if anything, we'll get there early. And George kind of relaxes after that. And then Kramer says, we might even get to visit the duty-free shop. And George scoffs. Duty is nothing. It's like sales tax. It's the biggest sucker deal in retail. Well, nevertheless, Kramer still likes to stop at the duty-free shop. And this sparks a little bit of an impromptu singing session between the two of them. I like to stop at the duty-free shop. They even harmonize. It's very beautiful. So next we're back on the plane, and the pretty woman next to Jerry is telling a modeling story that the photographer tells her to squeeze her breasts together. And she says, wait a minute, I thought this was an ad for shoes. And they laugh and laugh. And then she spots Jerry's new Esquire magazine and tells him to turn to page 146. Wow, getting out of the shower. Well, it's a good thing they gave you that washcloth to cover you up. And what is this an ad for? And she points out the wrinkled jeans in the background out of focus. The actress who plays this gorgeous woman, who is actually named Tia, we find out later, is Jennifer Campbell. She will appear in 2 more episodes, and she has quite a few credits in the 80s and 90s, but it looks like she really doesn't act anymore. I really like her. I think she's very grounded and very charming. And this character is written that way as well. It's a likable supermodel, if you will, because I think sometimes an overly beautiful woman can be portrayed to be a bit shallow, or their beauty is the only element that's focused on, kind of like the Tawny Katane character in that earlier episode of Seinfeld. But the way they write Tia, it's a very believable woman for Jerry to want to date. And for her, there would definitely be no penis versus brain chess match, So I think I really like Tia Van Camp as a character. Very well done. Then we cut back to a quick shot of Kramer and George in the car. They're stuck in traffic, of course, and George is absolutely livid. Just the look on his face. So mad. All right, the purpose of this scene, we see how much fun Jerry is having on this flight. It just keeps getting better and better for him. And my take, I think this is a fun scene. I really like Tia, like I said, Tia Van Camp, and the way Jennifer Campbell plays her. She's a smart and sexy woman. It's not at all portrayed overly sexualized or that she's ditzy or not smart. I like that she's a smart, capable woman. And especially that little shrug she gives to Jerry after he says, wow, coming out of the shower. It's very self-assured, like, hey, this is what I do. No shame about it. Just like, yeah, check it out. And there's nothing like slimy about the way Jerry's interacting with her either. I feel like in a situation where I think another show could have gone that route, where it's like he's so overcome by this woman's beauty that he becomes a little bit overzealous or something. But of course, that wouldn't be true to Jerry's character at all. So I like how he plays against her, how she plays against him. And I can definitely see why they'd bring her back in future episodes. A really great match for Jerry. All right, next we see once again, the opposite of what Jerry's going through with Elaine. She's sitting there in the middle seat and we hear her voiceover. She really needs to use the bathroom, but the man with all the bags on his lap, he's fast asleep. She says, maybe he'll wake up. But what if he doesn't and my kidneys burst? Is it worth it not to wake up this man to damage a major organ? She says, I hope this disgusting slob appreciates what I'm doing for him. Then she turns to the woman next to her who's chomping on her gum and she says, yeah, make a little more noise with your gum. That's helpful. Now, the actress who's chomping on the gum is Annie Corzin, and you may recognize her from the Penn episode, and in future episodes, she also plays Jack Klompus's wife, Doris. I think it's a little curious that they would use the same actress, considering she's been established as Jack Klompus's wife, but anyway, she's a totally different character in this episode. She's credited, in fact, as passenger number 2. But at any rate, I like her a lot, and she's still working at age 83, so good for her. The purpose of this scene, again, while Jerry is living it up with the gorgeous woman, Elaine is miserable in coach. And my take, I feel like this short scene could be so many of our internal monologues for ourselves during a travel experience. I love that we hear this as a voiceover from JLD. It's always such a fun device, especially when you have JLD making the corresponding expressions. I love her performance. You can really feel her discomfort. We've all had to pee so bad and it's not easy to get to the bathroom. And her disgust at the gum chewing. Everything is like at a 10 right now as far as how much it's annoying Elaine. And I think she portrays it just perfectly. All right, next we're at JFK. We see George and Kramer running through the airport because they are late. Kramer tells George to stop running like a girl and get his knees up. So we're seeing a mirroring of what happened earlier with Jerry and Elaine, including the stupid sexist girl running comment. Then we see them at the screen, that shows all the flights. Kramer's looking for Jerry and Elaine's flight. George says, look, we're a half an hour late. They probably took it off the board, but then Kramer finds it and says, oh, it was canceled. Of course, George wonders, hey, do I still get credit for this pickup? I mean, I was here. Kramer says he'll go to the ticket counter and ask. And then a man walks up to find his flight, and Kramer thinks he knows him. He looks very familiar to Kramer. And he asks George if he saw him, but George didn't. And George says, hey, you know what? I'm going to stop by the gift shop and pick up a Time magazine. Apparently, there's a blurb with Jerry, and he might have mentioned George's name. So we cut to the gift shop and we see this guy in handcuffs being escorted by the cops. He's saying over and over, I need my Time magazine. I never miss my Time magazine. And as soon as he gets to it, George picks it up and it's the last one. And the guy's like, hey, I want that magazine. And George says, I'm sorry, I got here first. I don't care. I want it. And George says, you don't understand. There might be a blurb about me. A blurb? You're a blurb. Look at the cover, idiot. So the handcuffed guy is the guy that's on the cover, and it says caught. And George sort of notices he's in these handcuffs, and he feels he's got the power here. So he refuses to give him the magazine and then continues to taunt him. If I weren't in these shackles, but you are, Blanche. You are in the shackles. As the guy's being dragged away, he just continues to taunt him. I can't wait to read my Time magazine. Last one, too. Maybe I'll read it in the park. Supposed to be a beautiful day. Have a nice life. Sentence, that is. Okay, I have to confess something. I never knew what the hell George was saying at the end. That have a nice life. Sentence, that is. So that little part, the sentence, that is, I could never understand what the hell he was saying. And I think sometimes when you can't understand something, it gets more and more warped in your mind. So in preparation for the podcast, of course, I'm watching this episode over and over again. And I was like, I've never really checked what this means. So I put on the closed captioning and then I learned it's have a nice life, sentence, that is. But just to show you how messed up in my own mind it was, this is what I would hear. Have a nice life. Sensere. I don't even know what sensere is, but that is what I heard. So if you want to rewatch it, you might hear it too. It's have a nice life. Sensere. But apparently it's sentence, that is. I'm very relieved to know what he says. But for gosh, 30 years now, I thought it was sensere. And then Kramer arrives to the gift shop and tells George that Jerry and Elaine are on a different flight and it arrives in LaGuardia in half an hour. So George says, okay, come on, we got to go. But then Kramer sees that familiar guy again, and the guy keeps looking at him too. Where do I know that guy from? And George says, come on, we got to go. All right, next, we are back on the plane. Elaine has reached her limit. She cannot hold it in anymore. And we hear the voiceover. She's trying to just will this guy awake. Wake up, you human slug! Wake up! Finally, she does wake him up and she apologizes. I'm sorry, I need to go to the bathroom. He's all put out. And then Elaine has to climb over his freaking legs and bags. She's pulling on the seats in front of her. She can barely get out, poor thing. And then she falls into the guy across the aisle and into the aisle itself. And the guy is just giving her a dirty look, the guy across the aisle. And then she just does this, I don't even know how to explain it, but this flinching towards his face and so funny. Meanwhile, in first class, again, the exact opposite of what Elaine's going through, Jerry and the model are enjoying a refreshing hot towel, and the flight attendant comes by with some slippers. Sounds lovely. And then Jerry asks, may I, to Tia, and slips one of the slippers onto her foot. Oh, you must be Cinderella. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Clink of the wine glasses. The actress who plays the flight attendant in first class is named Karen Denise Williams. Her only credit on IMDb, in fact, is this episode on Seinfeld. So then I decided to look her up just on the internet in general. I couldn't find much, but I did see that she has an Instagram account. And according to her profile, she's a health consultant for actors. And from what I could see on her profile, she has a lot of kind of tips about how to keep your mind sharp and, meditation and really cool tips for people, I think in general, but for actors specifically so that they can bring out the best in their performances. Also, since she was on Instagram, I was like, okay, I'm going to slide into her DMs. I know I probably shouldn't say that in this context, but I'm cool. I'm a cool mom. Anyway, so I just wrote her a message and I said, hey, I'm covering this episode of Seinfeld where you play the flight attendant. I'd love to hear about your experience. She has yet to even read the message, but you know what? Maybe if she does respond, I have a feeling it'll be like in a year or two. I will report back and let you know what she says. But anyway, I do love her. I think she is great. And also, oh my God, I'm so excited. Just like I caught the background actor in the Bubble Boy episode with her fantastic facial expressions, just reacting to everything. Karen Denise Williams has a moment, and I never noticed it until I was rewatching for this podcast episode. When Jerry says, "May I?" to Tia, she gives this look like, oh God, like, oh man, this is so cheesy or so corny. And I will post some screenshots on the Hot and Heavy Instagram account, which is Hot Heavy Elaine, by the way. It is hilarious. And just what a great choice. She just is like, she's sort of in this flight attendant persona where you have to be a little bit overly nice and professional. But she has this moment after Jerry asks to slip on a freaking slipper on Tia's foot. She just kind of turns away like, oh God. It's so funny. I highly recommend watching that. But like I said, I will put the screenshots up on our Instagram account. So the purpose of this scene, we're just seeing some more of the misery Elaine's going through, and then the enjoyment of Jerry on this flight. And my take, oh gosh, wow, just some delicious physical comedy here by JLD, and I love every single second of it. I especially love when she gets in that guy's face across the aisle. It's just so juvenile and weird. It's like you don't have any words to say, but you can't just let it go. When you're just so pissed off, you make like a face at someone. Oh, it's something you did when you were in like 4th grade. And I love that Elaine does it at whatever age she is here, early 30s, I guess. And I would love to know if that was something that JLD came up with on her own, or was that in the script? And if it was in the script, what was the stage direction? What was the wording of that? Because I just have so many questions. At any rate, it's a fantastic moment, and I just love it so much. All right, next we're back in Kramer's car. George and Kramer are on their way to LaGuardia. George is reading the Time magazine, and he's so pissed. He's like, there's no mention of his name in this blurb. And then Kramer finally figures it out. It clicks in his mind. John Grossbard. Who's that? George asks. Well, it turns out he was Kramer's old roommate like 20 years ago, always late on his rent. Now, one time he had Kramer lend him his share of the rent, which was $240, but he took the cash and disappeared. And Kramer tried to find him, but he never got his money back. He screwed me. And that was him, John Grossbard. And George says, come on, Kramer. I mean, it's $240 20 years ago. And then Kramer says, you know what? I'm going to turn around and confront him. And George stops him and says, no. You cannot abandon someone in the middle of an airport pickup. It's a binding social contract. We must go forward, not back. Next, we're back on the plane. Elaine is doing a pee-pee dance, waiting for the plane lavatory. Finally, a big dude walks out, and when Elaine tries to enter the bathroom, she is assaulted by what we can only assume is a horrible stench. She gulps some air, holds her breath, and goes in. In first class, Jerry returns to his seat from the first class bathroom and asks Tia if she saw all those fresh flowers in there. It was like an English garden. The flight attendant walks by and says, they're gardenias mostly. I thought I smelled lilac. Yes, well, there are some of those too. And Tia says, it's almost overwhelming. And then we hear the captain over the loudspeaker, and he says that due to equipment problems on the ground at LaGuardia, they've been rerouted back to JFK. While he's saying that, Elaine bursts through the bathroom at the end of his announcement, and finally able to breathe again. We can tell she's been holding her breath the whole time, but she missed what the captain had said. She asks everyone around her, what'd he say? What'd he say? The purpose of this scene, just, again, more showing the difference between Elaine and Jerry's experience. But then we move the story along to, for the sake of George and Kramer's storyline with the captain's announcement. Now, my take, they're really doing a great job with highlighting the worst annoyances on a plane. I mean, the plane bathroom, it's so gross. Even if it's not stinky, like what Elaine has to go through in this scene, it's just uncomfortable. It's so small. And in my experience, it's like overly wet everywhere. And that just, it just grosses me out. When things are just wet, and you hope it's water, but you can't be sure it's water. It's a bathroom. So you don't know what these puddles are. And I will admit, I will go out of my way to not use an airplane bathroom only in an emergency situation. I mean, I will make sure to go in the airport right before we board. Or if I have to go on the plane, fuck it. I will just hold it in. I'm like, I'm not going in that airplane bathroom. We get more of the great JLD physical comedy here. So much fun. I love the way she bursts out of that bathroom. So next we're at LaGuardia. Kramer is in the car and George comes back to the car, sits down and says, "You won't believe it. They've been rerouted back to JFK and we have 45 minutes. Ooh, this excites Kramer because now he can confront Grossbard. And then we hear the tires squeal as they drive off. Back on the plane, in first class, the flight attendant is going over this gourmet menu for Tia and Jerry. It just all sounds so decadent, including their featured wines from the Tuscany region. Tuscany! Back in coach, the meals are being distributed. But since Elaine went to the bathroom during the meal service, she is unable to get back to her seat because the meal cart is blocking the entire aisle. And the flight attendant is very annoyed with her. He tells her, "Well, you're just going to have to wait. You're not supposed to get up during the meal service." "Well, nobody told me that." He says, "Look, I've got a lot of meals to serve, and this is a full flight. You're just going to have to wait." So the purpose, of course, more misery for Elaine and more luxury for Jerry. And my take, so obviously I keep saying the same thing over and over again. They're really laying it on thick with how awful things are for Elaine and how great things are for Jerry. It's sort of this kind of same but different comparison with all these scenes. But somehow I don't think it's overdone, as weird as that sounds, even though we have so many examples of it. The woes of travel are so universal that all of these examples, especially what Elaine goes through, it's so relatable and so entertaining. So even though it's a little bit redundant with like, okay, we just keep showing how amazing first class is versus what Elaine's going through in coach, I'm still enjoying it. I love the way JLD plays annoyed Elaine at the flight attendant and vice versa. I love the way, I'm just going to call him Monroe, how Monroe plays it too. He's just like so over his job. And I love the way she said, "Well, nobody told me that." It's so well delivered. And same with his, "You're just going to have to wait." Oh, they're so good together, actually. It's such a great combination. Next, we're back at JFK. George and Kramer are at the screens again, showing the flights, and he sees Jerry and Elaine's flight, and they have plenty of time before it lands. Kramer sees Grossbard's flight takes off in 10 minutes, so he still has time to catch him. And George says there's no way. He probably boarded the plane already. And Kramer asks for George's credit card. "Don't ask any questions. I just need your credit card." And of course, George is like, "I'm not going to give you my credit card until you tell me what it's for." So Kramer says he's going to buy a ticket and get on the plane. He goes, "Are you nuts? You're going to spend more on the ticket than what he owes you." He's like, no, I'm not going to use the ticket. I'm just going to get his money, get off the plane, and then turn it in for a refund. Well, that changes George's mind because he has a card where if he uses it, he gets frequent flyer miles. He's like, "I get 2 tickets. We're going to return them anyway, and I'll get double the bonus miles." Loves this idea. All right, next we're back on the plane. Elaine finally gets to her seat after all the meals have been given out and makes that guy get up. Now he's got his bags on his lap and a tray of food. She apologizes, but she says, "I was stuck in the aisle. There's no way to get around that cart." And the bad guy tells her, "Well, you're not supposed to get up during the food service." "I'll try and remember that." Elaine notices she has no meal. "Where's my meal?" The guy says she was gone so long, he thought she'd changed seats. And then she gets the flight attendant's attention and says, "I didn't get a meal." "Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure. I would know if a tray of food had been served to me." "Would you?" "Yes." Like I said, I want to watch a show just between Monroe and Elaine. This is amazing. He tells her that the only meal left is a kosher meal. She doesn't want a kosher meal. "I don't even know what a kosher meal is." And the bad guy chimes in and he thinks it's when the rabbi inspects the food. And then Gum Chomper Lady on the other side says, no, it has something to do with the way they kill the pig. "Come on, they don't eat pigs." "They do if it's killed right, under a rabbi's supervision." Then we hear a guy off camera, who is Larry David, who remembers that he ordered the kosher meal. And then, "Why didn't you take it?" "Well, I forgot." "You're eating my meal." The flight attendant is just so done with this. He's like, "Look, I got earplugs to collect. Do you want the meal or not?" Meanwhile, in first class, Jerry and Tia are enjoying ice cream sundaes, huge ice cream sundaes. And then Jerry points out how wonderfully they've distributed all the elements, with the fudge on the bottom. And it enables one to control the fudge distribution while you're eating the ice cream. Oh, Tia is amazed at how much he knows about nothing. And Jerry's so flattered by that comment. Then we cut back to Elaine just staring at a gross-looking piece of meat on her fork. Then back to first class, the flight attendant is collecting the empty sundae dishes and asks, "More anything?" "More everything!" Of course, the purpose again, misery versus luxury. In my take, it's another very entertaining set of scenes. Like I said, we are getting a lot of these examples, and yet it doesn't feel redundant or heavy-handed. They're all entertaining. I really like the pacing of that scene where Elaine is like, "Where's my meal?" The discussion of kosher, and then like the other passenger remembering he ordered the meal. Elaine can't catch a break. And then it's like that ping pong kind of back and forth, all these different people talking. It's so well paced. One of my favorite moments is when she responds to the flight attendant when he asks if she really would know if a tray of food had been served to her. There's so much venom in that. Yes. Oh, I love it. And then that cut back to the ice cream sundaes and how much Jerry is enjoying himself. And then back to Elaine staring at that piece of meat. This is just such a well done episode. It's moments like this, it's small little things like just Elaine staring at a fork of gross looking meat. That's all you need to do. It shows, again, how shitty this experience is for her. All right, next, we're back at JFK. Kramer has gotten the tickets and tells George they're super savers. Super savers? Are they refundable? Oh, nope. George is reading the ticket, calls Kramer an idiot. "You got non-refundable tickets." Well, she talked me into it. She said it was the best deal. And then he's like, "Look, we'll split it, okay?" As if that makes it better. And while they're talking, the attendant at the gate has checked their tickets in. And so they have no choice but to get on the plane. George sort of hesitates and tries to explain, but then whatever, he just walks onto the jetway behind Kramer. They board the plane and George tells Kramer he needs to go to the bathroom. But Kramer is just focused ahead, looking for Grossbard. He finally finds Grossbard and confronts him. This man has no idea who Kramer is or what he's talking about. And Kramer just starts grabbing at him for his wallet. And of course, a scuffle ensues. Ba 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 ba. Boom, ba-dum, boom, 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 boom. We have a Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection here, folks. The guy who plays Grossbard is played by the actor Alan Wasserman, who has done a ton of work. I mean, hundreds of episodes of television. But specifically on Gilmore Girls, he played one of Nicole's lawyers who harasses Luke when he and Nicole are getting a divorce. So he's one of the Steins, for any of you out there familiar with Gilmore Girls. Also, I recognize him from an episode of The Office. He plays Michael's boss at the telemarketing place when Michael has to work two jobs because Jan is bleeding him dry. But anyway, there's your Gilmore Girls Seinfeld connection. All right, so we hear the commotion in the background as George is knocking on the bathroom door. Kramer's getting detained by security. So the man in the bathroom says, "Just a minute." But then he opens the door a few seconds later and oops, it's the convict that George took the Time magazine from and taunted. He grabs George and pulls him in. While George is being assaulted in the bathroom, Kramer is being forced off the plane. He tries to grab for George in the bathroom, but he's being dragged out too forcefully. All right, next on the plane, we see Elaine sneaking into first class. And most people are sleeping, including Jerry and Tia. Tia, in fact, has her head resting on Jerry's shoulder, very comfy, very cozy. So Elaine sees an open window seat in the back row, and she maneuvers her way into it. She, on her way to the seat, disturbs the woman in the aisle seat, but apologizes and then ends up sitting down, snuggles against the wall with a pillow, and exhales. Finally, some comfort for Lainey. But we see a hand come in and start tapping her on the shoulder. "Excuse me." Elaine pretends not to feel it, but the flight attendant knows she's faking. "Excuse me." Elaine acts like she belongs there and says, "Oh, nothing for me, thanks." "What is your name?" "Elaine Bennis." That's what I thought. "You're going to have to go back to coach." Elaine just begs and begs to stay. She points out no one was even sitting here. The flight attendant isn't taking any of Elaine's pleas. She says, no, you have to go back to coach. These seats are very expensive. Elaine is trying everything. Please don't send me back there. It's so nice up here. It's so comfortable up here. And then she spots fresh cookies being handed out. Oh, you have cookies. And then the flight attendant gets pretty firm. You're going to have to go back to your seat. Fine. But our goal should be a society without classes. Elaine goes through the curtain and yells to the coach passengers, do you realize that people up here are getting cookies? Tia and Jerry are woken up by the racket. Jerry asks, what is going on? Oh, there was a woman who tried to sneak up into first class. Oh, that's terrible. You know, that curtain isn't enough security. Really should have a locking door. And the flight attendant is apologizing profusely. We see Elaine getting back to her seat. The guy with the bags is sleeping again, and she just gets in his face and says, hey! Purpose of this scene, we are seeing the last straw for Elaine here during this flight. She is done. Done. And my take, I absolutely love everything about this scene. JLD kills every moment. When she finally settles into that first class seat and closes her eyes with her head against that pillow, I feel like we as the audience, we exhale with her when she exhales, like that. She's the sympathetic character in this episode by far, the one most of us can relate to, and the one we are really rooting for to get out of that terrible middle seat with that rude flight attendant and the dumbass bad guy. That exhale is so satisfying. But we know it's not going to last for even 10 seconds. And that little twitch of her face when the flight attendant taps on her and says, excuse me. I love the thought process there. Her first instinct is to just pretend she's sleeping. I mean, and who hasn't done that? I mean, if you've ever been to a sleepover and the parents come in to check because you guys are being too loud or whatever, pretend you're sleeping. That was the first course of defense at every slumber party. Elaine's begging, and the way she says, oh, you have cookies. Oh, God, we feel that disappointment of her being caught. And come on, lady, there was no one sitting there. Just let Elaine stay. She suffered so much. And then Elaine snapping, just yelling about society without classes and then announcing to coach that they're getting cookies up there. Oh, it's so great. And then we need that little break of Jerry and Tia being woken up by the racket, so bothered. How dare they be bothered in the least? And then the best moment of the episode, Elaine getting in that bag dude's face and yelling, hey. Oh, we are so with her in that moment. Just get it out, Lainey. Love it. All right, next we are at the last scene of the episode. We see Kramer being escorted by the security guy through the airport. He manages to escape though, and then Jerry looks out the plane window and they've landed and they're taxiing down the runway and he sees Kramer running alongside the plane. Jerry says, nah, couldn't be. And then we go to baggage claim and Jerry's got his bags. He's ready to go. He's all relaxed, in a good mood. Elaine's bags are in the carousel in Hawaii. And then she says, that was the worst flight I've ever been on. And then Tia walks by, surrounded by photographers. She grabs Jerry's hand and says she'll call him. He tells Elaine, it's a business thing. Then Kramer comes shooting out from the bag compartment onto the carousel, casually gets up and asks if they're ready to go. And Jerry asks where George is. Then we cut to a shot of George looking out of the plane window. The plane is in the air. He's disheveled from being beat up in the bathroom, and he's yelling, Kramer! All right, the purpose of this scene, we are seeing our resolution to all the plots. Elaine's bag is, of course, not there. Kramer manages to meet up with them, albeit through the baggage chute. And George is trapped on the flight with the prisoner and Grossbard. And this is a great ending to the episode. The Kramer stuff is totally over the top, but I don't mind it. I love how relaxed Jerry is, and we see how exhausted Elaine is. Again, our last sort of juxtaposition there at the end. And when Tia comes by, that's all Elaine has to see to know that Jerry had a pretty amazing flight. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side.
I got a question for you. What's worse than your pickup truck stalling out on the way to the tractor pull and you're in charge of bringing the beer and steaks for the tailgate? That's right, running with a girl. Look, I know it's not woke or whatever, but girls are scientifically proven to be worse runners than men. Ever been late for a flight with a girl? Forget it. They don't take long, manly strides. They don't even get their knees up. And they don't spit. That's why I created a program for all the slow-ass ladies in your life. It's called Man Running. And that's exactly what they'll be able to do by the end of my training. Run like a man. My name is Dirk Burleman, and you're welcome. Now don't go canceling me for being sexist. I did my own research. Turns out, if you look hard enough, you can find plenty of evidence for your preconceived opinions on YouTube. Good enough for me. If you're embarrassed by how slow your chick runs, go to my website, runlikeyouhaveapenis.man, and sign her up for a 12-week lesson. Now don't even ask her. Just sign her up, tell her you've got a surprise for her, and then drop her off out front. Me and my trainers will take it from there. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh, you'll be in the doghouse with her. But with every purchase of a Man Running training package, you will receive $500 in Kohl's cash and a copy of that Joanna Gaines book. Right? Yeah, she'll forgive you pretty quick. Never be slowed down by your woman ever again. Sign her up for Man Running and get ready. She may even outrun you. I'm just kidding. I mean, she's a girl. Man Running. Fast chicks never go out of style.
And we're back. There was an inside look for this episode, and in it, JLD says that after this episode aired, she says she has been told by so many flight attendants how much they love this episode. And JLD also loved playing that stinky bathroom bit. She said it was so much fun to play that. The commentary was done by Larry Charles, the writer of this episode. And he said originally Elaine's storyline was to be sitting next to a man who dies on the flight, but it was deemed to be too dark. And but this was something kind of ripped from the headlines because it did happen on a flight. So they wanted that to be Elaine's experience. And yeah, I guess that would be probably worse than what she goes through on this flight, but yeah, a bit too dark. While the scene where Elaine is climbing over the guy on her way to the bathroom, falling down, doing all that physical comedy, Larry Charles says how great she is in this episode and that she's a tremendous and underrated physical comedian. And I couldn't agree more, Larry Charles. I'm glad he said that. Then he goes on to describe Elaine as a beautiful woman who's crazy, physical, and dark. And then he says she is such a great television character. I guess you could say that's why I'm doing this podcast, Larry Charles. I totally agree. Okay, there were a couple of deleted scenes. There's a scene where Jerry checks in on Elaine in Coach. He comes over to her and asks how she's doing. And Elaine's very much doesn't want to let on that she's having a bad time or that anything's wrong. So she says, yeah, everything's fine. Meal was great. And yeah, it's great. And then he tells her, hey, there's an open seat in first class. And she shrugs it off. What's the difference? Not a big deal. And then she notices something on Jerry's face and he's like, oh, it's hot fudge and walks away. So this scene was supposed to happen, obviously, before she sneaks into first class. That's how she would know that there was an open seat. But yeah, they decided to cut it because it still works, even if she doesn't find that out from Jerry. But I think that's still a funny scene. I like that Elaine in that scene is like, no, it's fine. She doesn't want to give him the satisfaction that she's having a terrible time in Coach. And then there's an alternate ending for the episode where George does make it off the flight after being beat up, and he finds Jerry and Elaine at baggage claim. He says, you wouldn't believe what happened to me. And then Elaine says, you wouldn't believe what happened to me, referring to her awful flight. And then Tia comes by and shakes Jerry's hand and says, I'll call you. And then Jerry says, you wouldn't believe what happened to me. So all different interpretations of what that means. And then Kramer shoots out of the same baggage chute and they all leave. In the notes about nothing, I thought this was interesting. This episode had over 40 separate scenes and was 74 pages long. They're not 40 long scenes, of course. They're just kind of snippets here and there, but there is so much jam-packed into this episode. Kind of when I was going through it, I'm like, it's hard to believe this wasn't an hour long. But the pacing was just so well done that, 40 scenes just went by like that. All right, let's move on to Contributor Corner. Greg sent in some thoughts this week, and he says, I have to start by saying this is in my top 3 Seinfeld episodes ever. While last week's episode was a classic fan favorite, which I missed contributing to due to a busy week, sorry, Shivani, this one I love even more. While all 4 leads do not have a scene together as a group, I still love how this is played out because every line of script here is perfection. To keep it somewhat short, I'll keep my thoughts strictly to Elaine's storyline of being stuck in Coach. Well, first of all, Greg, please don't apologize. You have contributed above and beyond what I've ever expected. So if you miss a week, it's not a big deal. Although, full disclosure, I did check in on Greg because I was surprised. I'm like, it's the contest. I didn't get any thoughts. What's wrong? Is Greg okay? Yeah, it's just a busy week. We all have those from time to time. All right, so let's move on to Greg's next thought. He says, I really enjoy the car ride to the airport for Elaine and Jerry because the dialogue feels very natural. They go from topic to topic and it's all very lighthearted as they laugh about the cheap hooker smell and George's ability to touch the awning. I love this so much because I would think a real-life conversation between Jerry and Julia would be similar. Yeah, totally. In fact, you kind of can see that in Julia's episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. It's just so relaxed and they laugh and they make each other laugh equally. It's so great. I highly recommend watching that episode. Next, Greg says, I very much love that Jerry takes the first class seat. It's such a dick move by him and not at all gentlemanly, but this is kind of what makes Jerry Jerry. He's not someone to go out of his way to be thoughtful. Elaine is miffed, but goes along. Had she known what was in store, I think she would have put up more of a fight. Exactly. Like I said earlier, really solidifying what these characters are about. And certainly for Jerry, it's about looking out for himself, not being a gentleman, especially not towards Elaine. Now, Tia, that's different. But it is what makes Jerry Jerry. Very good point. And I didn't even think about this, but in past episodes, I've sort of highlighted how the men in this show have often screwed Elaine over many times, from the apartment to dating her roommate and seeing her naked. There's so many instances where these men make her life miserable. And this is another example of that in this episode. Greg goes on to say, the entire series of scenes of Elaine and Coach juxtaposed with Jerry in First Class is a masterclass in sitcom writing. Elaine wedged in a middle seat next to a guy with luggage on his lap and a loud gum chewer is a hilarious premise on its own. Have JLD perform it, and the Emmy should have been given to her just for this. I love her interior monologue as her hatred for everyone around her grows. Yes, I think I've said in this episode, it's just masterful. You take something so relatable that we've all been through and you put JLD in charge of performing it, forget it. You're in for perfection, my friends. Next, Greg says, my favorite Elaine moments are when she goes to the restroom and reacts to the stink of the guy who destroyed it before her and her rushing to hold her breath to do what she needs to do. If you don't laugh watching this, check your pulse. Another favorite moment is when she sneaks up to First Class just for some peace and how quickly she gets thrown out. Her soft delivery of the line, nothing for me, thank you, cracks me up, and then her shift back to angry as she yells, hey, right in the face of the aisle seat dickhead. Oh, I like that. Aisle seat dickhead. She's so pissed off by the end of all of this. Politeness has gone out the window. Yes, I mean, what a fun episode. You go from this lightheartedness in the beginning to just going through all this bullshit. And for the most part on the flight, she's trying to maintain her composure and being a polite person. Even though that guy's such a aisle seat dickhead, to quote Greg, so inconsiderate. And then he's going to act all put out when she has to go to the bathroom, a very human thing to do. And then she's still like, I'm sorry. But then from that to see her just lose it all and be like, fuck everyone on this flight. I'm not being polite anymore. Oh, what a gift. So funny. And lastly, Greg says, I could go on for hours discussing not only JLD's performance here, but the simple pleasure of Jerry's experience and also the hilarious George and Kramer side to the episode with the prisoner and Grossbard is meaty enough so that it feels like everyone of the four has an equal share of the episode. But it is Elaine who packs the biggest punch and has the funniest story and performance of the whole show. Maybe that's why it's in my top 3 episodes. Agreed. It's a very balanced episode with the main four having a lot of fun. I guess you could even argue when I'm thinking about it, George... Yeah, I guess, okay, George has the whole convict thing, but it's a rare thing for Elaine to be gifted, or JLD to be gifted, like the funniest plot of the entire episode. And she does, and she knocks it out of the park. It's so fantastic. Thank you so much, Greg. Now, moving on, Todd also sent in some thoughts this week, and this is what Todd had to say. Overall, a great episode where JLD's character was the recipient of nearly all the comedic writing gold, and every situation her character goes through is so relatable. It just makes each scene that much more enjoyable to watch. Elaine serves as the lens we all see ourselves through when we fly, especially Coach. Just human luggage being crammed into the smallest space possible with very little consideration for a good customer experience unless, of course, you upgraded to first class. Right. I feel like I said it a couple times, but the relatability of what Elaine's going through is what makes this so enjoyable. So enjoyable. All right, and then Todd says, random thought, is this the first and only time Elaine's sister in St. Louis is referenced in the episode? We meet her dad in the classic early season episode with Jerry's pink-lined interior coat and George with the show tune earworm, but I don't think I recall any other family references over the 9 years of the show. Well, it's funny you should say that, Todd, because in the next episode, we see Elaine get a phone call from her sister Gail because of her Christmas card with her her nephew. Check under his mattress. So we do hear that. The only other time we hear anything with Elaine's family, of course, like you said, we meet Alton Venice in that one and only episode. But she talks about, well, maybe I'll go visit my mother. She just bought me some panties and they're all laid out for me. So she says something about that. But no, yeah, I don't believe we hear anything else about Gail. So we hear about the sister here in this episode and then in the pick episode. So Todd goes on to say, Elaine in the classic biting the hand that feeds you situation being snippy with the skycap. Who in their right mind would ever threaten a skycap? You're literally asking for your luggage to disappear and never be seen again. Being friendly, slip them a tip, be sincere with your thank you, and still pray your luggage ends up on the plane you're on. She deserved to have her bag end up in Honolulu. It's so true to her character, though. Like, Elaine, if she thinks she's being taken advantage of, she's going to call it out. But yes, you're right. There's just certain service people you don't mess with. Like, don't be rude to your waiter or waitress because you're going to get spit in your food. Like, just be nice. Figure out another way if they're being assholes to maybe stick it to them. I don't know. But it's like, yeah, I don't know if she deserved her bag ending up in Honolulu, but she certainly got her comeuppance on the flight. So there's that. Ooh, okay. Todd says, not aging well alert. A girl runs like a girl joke. JLD at least gets the physical comedy laugh while trying to run through an airport while carrying 2 oversized carry-ons. But like the last episode with more time to spare and less comedic content in the episode, Elaine's character would have ripped Jerry a new one. Yes, agreed. I've already said how sexist and stupid this joke is. But Elaine, they don't have the time for her to do anything about this. Hopefully she brought it, in my mind, in an unaired, behind the scenes moment, she did rip Jerry a new asshole for that awful, awful comment about running like a girl. Todd goes on to say, I guess I don't recall much about air travel pre-9/11, but was there a time when there were no limits on carry-ons? I remember not having to pay to check luggage, but was it literally a free-for-all in terms of bags? I love the character on the aisle next to Elaine who boxes her in and has at least 4 carry-ons. Once she's blocked from getting to the aisle, the seat in front of her reclines, completely locking her in. Everybody, especially taller people like me, can relate to wanting to strangle the recliner in front of them. I totally forgot to mention that. Thank you, Todd. Yes, that's when she says, "Help me," because the person in front of her reclines. Oh my gosh. I know that's such a fucking nightmare. And it's like, I always get irritated with people who recline their seat because it's literally like an inch. It's like, really? Is that much more comfortable? Like, seriously. And I am a taller person as well, not as tall as Todd, but I am a 5'9" woman and I have longer legs. So yes, I hate when people recline their seat. It's so inconsiderate. I never do it, by the way. I am a considerate person, guys. And then Todd goes on to sort of list other things that he really liked about the episode. Elaine's inner monologue to the people around her on the flight, the slob on the aisle, the recliner in front of her, the gum chewer in the window seat. He loves the tisk-tisking, a sign of what's to come in future episodes, when she watches the English patient and yells back at the shushing crowd, "Go to hell!" Holding her breath to get into the nasty airplane toilet, missing her meal and having to settle for a kosher meal, sneaking into first class and trying to pull off the impossible airplane seat change, yelling, "Hey," a centimeter from the guy's face when she returns to her seat. Who hasn't dreamed of doing that at some point? A great, great episode for JLD. I still think it's one of the most underrated episodes in the series. Yes, Todd. Yes, yes, yes to all of that. Thank you so much for sending in those thoughts. And thank you again, Greg, for sending in your thoughts. If you would like to contribute to a future episode of Hot and Heavy, please email me at elainepodcast@gmail.com. That's elainepodcast@gmail.com. And you will be alerted to which episode I would like thoughts for. All right, my favorite Elaine moments. Well, can the entire episode be a favorite moment? Because it really is. Like Todd and like Greg said, this is... she gets the funniest plot. She gets all of this delicious comedy. It's amazing. And so the entire episode for me is a favorite Elaine moment, but I'll narrow it down to a couple. I absolutely love the scene of her sneaking up into first class. Like I said, every single moment is so well done in that scene. There's even a little physical comedy in there when she falls getting into that open seat. So it's so great. And more than anything, it's just, I think us as an audience, we've seen her go through all of this awful stuff in Coach, stuff we can all relate to, which is why it's so effective. And then that exhale moment of her getting into first class, she's got the pillow and she's just kind of snuggling in. Oh, I think we all feel that relief that lasts for less than 10 seconds. And then, of course, the hey in the guy's face. It's so great. And then that actor's reaction is also great. He's just like jerks up. It's so amazing. So kudos to him as well. And my final notes. Hallelujah. This is such an Elaine heavy episode. I love it. Oh my gosh. It's such a great example of using every tool in JLD's comedy tool belt here, from just being funny and cool in the beginning to getting annoyed on the flight. We get physical comedy. We get begging Elaine, almost crying Elaine, and then pissed off Elaine at the end. And it's about time we get all of this. And just look at the quality of episode we get when we are blessed with everything JLD has to offer. I hope they learned their lesson here. Never give JLD just a side storyline or something with no substance, because look at what she does when she's given this comedic gold. I'd also like to point out, other than the stupid sexist running bullshit early on, here's a plot for Elaine that has nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. It's just a character having a shitty time on a flight. It's a great example, a great lesson in comedy writing that Larry Charles did here. Just writing a funny plot without trying to write a funny female plot. Just, give funny women funny shit to do. And with the right actress, you'll get absolute gold, like I said. And this is what we get here. It could have easily been George on this flight with Jerry. And would Jason Alexander have been able to make it hilarious? Of course he would have. But I love that this was given to Julia Louis-Dreyfus and we get to see Elaine in this environment. Oh, what an absolute gift. And I can't say it enough. This is a supremely fantastic episode of Seinfeld. One that I feel, like Todd even says, it kind of flies a bit under the radar, no pun intended. And I don't feel like it makes a lot of people's highlight reel, but when you're reminded of this episode, there's no way that you can miss how just incredibly funny it is and how solid of an episode it is. Like I said, like this fourth season is when they find their footing. And this episode, I think, is, we were coming off of the contest, which was a hilarious episode as well. Again, very balanced with the main four having all these storylines and really funny moments in themselves. But this is, they follow it up with the airport, which is balanced in a different way, where it's like not all four of them are together for really any scene, and yet it's just as strong and just as funny. And I think that's all I can say about the airport. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.